It's one thing to listen to doom and gloom about food and fertilizer shortages, skyrocketing prices, the cost of living, or your job being outsourced overseas or eliminated due to automation. It's quite another thing to hear practical, immediately actionable advice from experts who can help you reduce the fear, anxiety, and burden of these problems. Tune in now to the Surviving Hard Times podcast from the Finding Genius Foundation with Richard Jacobs. Before we begin, a note from our sponsor. I'm Richard Jacobs, Executive Director of the nonprofit Finding Genius Foundation and host of the Finding Genius podcast. In late 2016, I was rear-ended at 65 miles an hour by a truck on the highway, which sent me off-road into a ditch. The impact of the collision gave me a concussion and other injuries. At the hospital, a CT scan showed that I had thyroid nodules, which turned out to be cancer. It was then, when I had a biopsy of my neck, that I realized even if I was a millionaire, I wouldn't want a second or a third biopsy due to the pain and the invasiveness of it. And appointments at that time for thyroid experts were 3 to 6 months out, and I was worried about dying now, even if that was irrational. So because of this, I've decided to raise money to conduct a literature review on steroids, on the causes of anxiety and depression, a condition that affects well over 50 million people in the United States and hundreds of millions worldwide. Our goal is to create a codex, a guide that reveals all possible treatments for anxiety and depression for people that live with the condition or for loved ones that have it, as my wife and my son do. To find out more about our fundraiser, visit findinggeniusfoundation.org and click on current initiatives. And now to our guest. Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Surviving Hard Times podcast, sponsored by the Finding Genius Foundation.
I have Rick Passenier. He's a co-founder and executive board member of Go PHA. And PHA is a chemical name, PolyHydroxyAlkanoate. I hope I pronounced that properly. There's a global organization for it. It's called Go PHA. It comprises a coalition of over 60 stakeholders that include the material producers themselves, brand owners, academia, waste management organizations, innovative material startups, environmental foundations, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to talk about Rick's role in this organization and what PHA is. Welcome, Rick. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and I'm excited to be here.
Well, great. Well, tell me a bit about your background, and then let's talk about Go PHA.
Yeah, thank you. So, as you mentioned, my name is Rick. I have a background in industrial product design. I studied at Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands, Europe. For over 10 years, I've been working in innovation in the plastics business. I've worked with many applications in a lot of different segments, from automotive to packaging to consumer products and electronics. Nowadays, you find plastics everywhere. And in my time as a product designer and open innovator, I've run into almost all the plastics that you can imagine, from very high performance materials to really the commodity plastics like PP, PE, PET. And in that process, I also came in touch, of course, with bio-based materials and the classical bioplastics, as they were coined. And once I got into touch with PHA, polyhydroxyalkanoates, I really fell in love and really believe in the fact that this is the future of the way we can use materials in a safe way, with keeping the performance of plastics, but really offering a much better solution for the planet. So that's how I came into touch with 3 fellow persons. And in 2018, we decided to set up the nonprofit Go PHA, which actually is an abbreviation for the global organization for PHA. Yeah. So
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is PHA? How is it used? Let's get into the material itself a little bit. Again, what are its uses and where does it come from?
Yeah, so PHA has been around longer than mankind. Okay, so this is PHA is in fact a macromolecular product which is present in nature, actually all around us. Most bacteria use the product, the polymer PHA, as a form to store carbon for later use. The way we humans have fat reserves, so we overeat, we store fats, and we use it when we are in a position of starvation. The same way, actually, most bacteria use different types of PHA polymers to actually store carbon. And you can actually harvest different bacteria from all over the world, from different areas. So, for example, if you have a palm tree plantation, you will find bacteria that can consume oils and greases that are coming from palm trees. If you have marine habitats, like seashores, you will find bacteria that can consume sugars or types of sugars that are derived from seaweeds. And even here in Amsterdam, in the Amsterdam canals, you will have bacteria that can actually convert methane or biogas into PHA. So actually, the discovery of PHA has been very early already. I think it was late 1800s, where one of the Dutch scientists, Bayering, he actually discovered PHA, and also the period after they managed to extract the PHA from the bacterial cell. Now, you can imagine that, the route toward isolation, identification of these natural polymers is difficult and time-consuming process. So over the last decades, there have been multiple academic and industrial processes and efforts into identifying the whole family of PHAs, because PHA is not just one product. Actually, there's many different bacteria that make it, and also depending on the specific type of feedstock that they can consume, they would create a slightly different type of PHA polymer, which in some would also have different performance. And this is really where the biotechnology comes into touch with material science. And that makes it also quite challenging. And it has been quite challenging to really scale up PHA until just a few years ago, where actually we really see a fast uptake in the possibilities. So it looks like today, really all the academic efforts from the past decades and all the industrial efforts to effectively and efficiently make PHAs, and also the understanding of how the polymers behave in industrial plastics processing like injection molding, fiber spinning, etc. This is now all coming together, and we see a really rapid uptake in the possibilities of making PHA and PHA products, and also the commercial capability and capacity that are coming online now to actually make PHA at commercial scale.
Well, what are some of the material properties of it that are unique to it and favorable?
So it's a bit of a technical story, but basically you have PHAs that are short in their polymer structure, and you have PHAs that have side chains, medium and longer chains that would comprise the polymer backbone. And depending on how long these side chains are, and also how they are structured along the backbone of the polymer, and also the content of how many of these side chains are in that polymer, you will have completely different performance. To give you an example, there is a PHA type, which is called PHBH, polyhydroxybutyrate hexanoate. The hexanoate is a comonomer, and depending on how much of that comonomer content you have, the more different properties that you can have. So the higher that comonomer content is, the more ductile, the more flexible this product becomes, and also the more amorphous the bioplastic also behaves. So what we have seen, and that's also why all these decades of academic and industrial work, have been there that lead up to this culmination point, is that the most available product in nature, the most simple version of PHA is called actually PHB, polyhydroxybutyrate. And I know that it's quite confusing with all these different abbreviations. But the sum is, PHA is just a family name. PHB is one of the most common commercial products from the family, and is also one of the simpler molecules. This product is, and for the listeners, you cannot see this, but I'm showing a pen that I'm holding in my hand. This product is actually made with one of those PHA materials. So,
well, what is it? So, it's particularly biodegradable more so than other plastics, or why is it? Why was it studied, and is it taking a larger role in plastic today because it has desirable characteristics and it's easily biodegradable? I mean, what's its inside story?
So the fact that actually nature provides us material that are inherently compatible with nature is, of course, a beautiful thing. I think in the sustainability transition, everybody sees cellulose-based products, basically paper and cardboard, as inherently sustainable because we can see trees growing around us, we can see agricultural products growing around us, and we know it's safe, and we would love to use these products, right? And the same holds for PHA. PHA is present in nature. If it enters nature, it's also recognized by enzymes and bacteria, and they can break down the product. So PHA, the proposition touches many of the really concerning points that today we are dealing with. That first, the problems with persistent plastics, as we call them, basically fossil and plastics that remain in nature for many 100 years, has become so visible. Yeah, we all know the images that we have seen all over, that really brands are really pulling hard to get new solutions onto the market. And of course, also regulations are really driving these innovations very rapidly as well. And PHA basically touches upon a lot of the key points that are required today. First, it is a naturally occurring product, which makes it suitable to consider for medical applications. But also, we know indeed that it's not persistent in nature. PHA end of life is very diverse. It behaves like a plastic, so you can recycle it, but it also behaves like a biopolyester, so you can actually chemically recycle it into monomers. But also, you can organically recycle it back to CO2, water, and humus. And PHA does so in the right environments. Yeah, of course, you need fungi and bacterial activity for doing so. But PHA does that at extremely high rates, very comparable to cellulose and paper products. And this is really unique about PHA compared to other products like PLA, PBAT, etc. And lastly, PHA is also a great product to close the loop with waste streams and plant-based or bio-based feedstocks. Like I mentioned, these bacteria can really consume a lot of different feedstocks. So that means that from vegetable oils to used cooking oils to all sorts of different types of sugars, but also organic waste-derived volatile fatty acids, for example, can all be used as feedstocks to create high-value PHA products. And this really makes it a very interesting product to start utilizing. Industrial waste streams, municipal solid waste streams, even wastewaters are being used at the moment to make PHA. And the very last point is that, of course, we didn't even scratch the surface with respect to the potential microplastics issue. And PHA is a proven product already in existing regulations and considered not to be creating persistent microplastics. And of course, this is also a very important point going forward.
So again, is PHA more biodegradable than PET or other plastics? Is it a lot more biodegradable? When it's out there in the environment, is it also contributing to microplastics contamination? What's unique about it out there alongside all the other plastics?
Yeah, so indeed, you're completely right. So of course, PET is a persistent plastic. It will take a few 100 years before it starts even fragmenting. So you have a whole range of biodegradable materials, and PHA scores among the best of these materials in terms of the speed of biodegradation and also in the environments of biodegradation. So some of the materials that we know, for example, PLA, polylactic acid. This is actually a product which is not occurring in nature and actually only compost in industrial composting facilities, okay? While PHA is a product that can be home composted. It can also work in industrial composting facilities, but also it is proven to be biodegradable in marine, soil, and sweetwater conditions. And actually, we are running a test at the moment with the Royal Netherlands Institute for Oceanographic Research in exactly testing the biodegradation speeds compared to cellulose in water, actual seawater from the North Sea.
So will PHA take the place of any of the traditional plastics that may be problematic, or is it just another tool in the arsenal of plastics that can be used?
So we believe that in our transition to more sustainable use of materials, we need all forms of circularity, right? We cannot just create new solutions while the tap is still wide and open. Yeah? So especially for proven products that are high volume, for sure, we still need products like the classical plastics in this transition period, and we have to close those loops. So recycling, reuse, all these efforts are really necessary. But what we see with PHA is that PHA can offer the same or similar functionality, the same or similar circularity, but at the same time offer a microplastics-free and a natural solution that is competitive to the persistent solutions that we know today. And of course, we're talking about a product which is really in its early growth stage. So, together we create and we consume a tremendous amount of plastics. So this is not something that in a few years the PHA industry can, of course, compete with. But we are very optimistic. We see a great drive in technological capability. and also a great drive in scaling up the industrial capacity. And this is really necessary, but of course it will take years, if not decades, before we can compete with the volumes of the classical plastics industry.
So what role will PHA products have in the plastics industry? Where do they seem to be going and springing into use? What's the unique niche for it?
So I believe that PHA can really be a bulk material in the future, yeah. But at the same time, today, of course, we have very limited industrial capacity. And this is, of course, something that also is changing rapidly. So what you see is that people are looking for those applications where at the moment PHA can create most impact, okay? So you see efforts in films, in paper coatings, in products that inherently end up in nature. For example, the intentionally added microplastics or coatings, paints and coatings, but also agricultural applications. For example, silage and mulch films are products. And also, of course, food packaging, where there's a lot of, applications where actually no one will today or even in a few years from now recycle some sort of product, even if they would be recyclable. Consider a confectionery wrapper, right? From some sort of a snacks bar or something like this. These products are very light, very fugitive, as they call it. So if there's a bit of wind or, some ill-disciplined customers, these products will very quickly end up in nature. And if they are collected, they will never be recycled because the economics will never play out for these types of applications. So therefore, in that case, inherently, you would benefit with these sort of compostable and biodegradable applications, as well as for applications where you have a lot of contamination effects. You can imagine, condiment sachets or single-serve pouches of cosmetics. These are all products, or even food serviceware. These are all products where you have high levels of contamination, which really, hampers the recyclability of these products. And you also see that in, recently there has been a lot of technological advancement in fibers, in non-wovens, for example, for hygiene products, and even in tissue engineering products for in the body or wound care products, we see PHA applications arising. So PHA is really a niche material in disguise, I would say. At the moment, there's so little material available that everybody considers it a niche material, but at the same time, it can really target bulk and commodity applications where today still a lot of the fossil plastics are being used.
I didn't ask you much about Go PHA, the global organization for it, but what are some of the tenets of the foundation of the organization?
Yeah, Go PHA is a special platform. Go PHA is not a traditional industry association or a research institute. Rather, we are a platform with like-minded organizations, academic organizations, industrial organizations, brands, converters, waste management organizations that all see the benefit and value of PHA and would like to drive that forward. And to drive that forward really requires a very high degree of collaboration. Collaboration in communication, how to reach out to consumers and how to actually spread the message of the benefits of PHA, but also communication with and to policymakers. For example, Go PHA is an accredited organization at the UN Treaty for Plastics at the moment, where recently the event was held in Paris. And there we really need to bring alternatives to fossil plastics into the light of policymakers. And also in the United States, of course, there's a lot of regulatory pressure against traditional plastics. And we have to be very careful with these regulations that, with all the good intentions of, providing bans and regulations against plastics, that in that process, we do not harm actually available and effective alternatives such as PHA, but also other materials and solutions that always are jeopardized in these kind of broad stroke policies and bans and regulations. So that's very important. And then lastly, as the industry develops, we also need a high degree of collaboration on application development, and we call it community data. So for example, doing biodegradation studies, doing compostability studies, doing studies to see if actually indeed PHA can be sorted next to other plastics in a MRF. if PHA actually does not do harm if it's ingested in animals, and indeed it doesn't. So all these sort of studies, of course, we can do at Go PHA, which benefits the whole industry.
Okay, very good. Where can people find out more about PHA and its uses, and find out about the Go PHA Foundation as well?
So we have a website. It's very well visited all around the world. It's called www.gopha.org. This is our website where a lot of our publications are being found, a lot of industry news is being found. And also, of course, on our LinkedIn channel, we publish really the latest information on certifications, on regulations, but also key innovations. And something else really exciting, I think, is the PHA World Congress. This year, the third edition of the PHA World Congress will take place in Atlanta, Georgia on October 10th and 11th. It's a 2-day congress where really the best of PHA players come together and share information and present information. It's open to anybody that would like to visit. And really have top speakers that will contribute to the program. So you can find more information on that on pha-world-congress.com.
Well, very good. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and I was happy to be here.
Before you stop listening, ask yourself, what are 1 or 2 useful things you heard on this podcast that can help you overcome food and fertilizer shortages, skyrocketing prices, the cost of living, or your job being outsourced overseas or eliminated due to automation? Please like and subscribe and tell your friends and family about the Surviving Hard Times podcast. We're all going to need help now and in the near future.